Gacha is a monetization model, not a genre of the game itself, and if someone does not prefer the genre beneath the Gacha monetization model, be it if it's an open world Gacha, and combat RPG Gacha, right, AFK shooter Gacha, whatever amount of Gacha is, no amount of quality of life of dev listen can convince someone to play a Gacha game just for the sake of the Gacha game.
Mr. Pokey, are you the reason why I can't convince people that Girls Frontline 2 is more than a gooning game? Do I have to teach this global passive enjoyer a lesson now? In my previous video covering my personal opinions of the Zenless Zone Zero version 2.0 content update, I very briefly brought up the presence and use of black screens in the presentation of the latest main story content. Personally, I'm not too torn up about their use here, as the scenes they were used in place of I found of little importance to the story anyway, or involved scenes or characters I couldn't care less about. Though, as I predicted, that hasn't stopped others from calling them out and heavily criticizing the story because of it. I've seen a lot of comments about how Hoyoverse should have just add more comic scenes in place of all the black screens, which, with all due respect, is just about the most ignorant, armchair developer response I have heard in a long while, and really just goes to show how absent-minded players have been of what the last half year of ZZZ has been like and what caused all this. That's right, I am talking about the sunsetting of the TV mode and how its absence is one of, if not the primary reason why Zenless Zone Zero's major content updates have felt incomplete, rushed, lopsided, corner-cutting, or all of the above. Before I start, I must preface that my opinions of the TV mode have always been neutral. I never loved it, I never hated it. However, one thing that was for certain is that I completely understood its presence in the game and why the ZZZ team were so adamant to try and make it work for so long before they had to finally bend the knee. So, let me now tell you why that was. The Hollow Deep Dive System, aka H.D.D, aka TV mode, was in many ways a thread that ran through and held together all major elements surrounding the game, from story to its gameplay. The player would assume the role of the twins, Bell and Wise, a pair of proxies whom would provide their services of guiding clients through the hollows of Zenless Zone Zero through their unique ability to possess their companion Bangaboo, Eos, and guide them from the outside. The TVs, by extension, acted as an abstract perspective for the player to experience the game through, navigating from TV to TV like they were tiles on a tabletop RPG board, and would make decisions for the entire party as they landed on unique event tiles with different effects based on the context of the TV. Since Eos cannot fight ethereals, when moving on an enemy TV, the player's perspective would change and they would take direct control of the agents they deployed for the level. Clear the enemies, return to the overhead TV's perspective, rinse, repeat. From a gameplay standpoint, the TVs offered a dual gameplay loop that would go hand in hand with each other, as decisions or actions made in one mode of play could potentially influence how the player would continue in the other. What TV events and enemy encounters should you take, how your current health and corruption debuffs would influence if you played it safe or went all in, stuff like that. From a narrative perspective, it was established early on that the twins could not fight and lacked the physical aptitude to remain in the hollows for long enough without risking severe ether corruption, and their unique ability to assume direct control of Eos made for an intriguing set of questions. How are they able to do this? What are they doing this for? Did someone give them these powers? And if so, where is that person now? And how did they get those powers in the first place? It was unique, narratively cohesive, and offered an experience that you wouldn't find in Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail. But there was an even greater reason why the TV mode was so integral to Zenless Zone Zero as a game. Beyond the aspects of the game itself, the TV mode from a development standpoint was much easier and resource efficient to build a game around when compared to the fully 3D, explorable spaces of Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. Something the ZZZ team would greatly make use out of, as they were confirmed to be the smallest of the 3 teams developing games under Hoyoverse. To help illustrate my point, I want to bring up a different game for a second. That game is Persona 3. Hey, the music choice for this video makes sense now. In 2004, the darling JRPG company we know as Atlus was actually looking to be shut down following a series of unsuccessful game releases, with the most recent one being Digital Devil's Saga. Persona 3, for all intents and purposes, was looking to be Atlus's last chance to make something for themselves in 2006. However, due to the lack of resources and budget, they couldn't produce something on a scale close to anything they've done before. This level of restraint forced Atlus to take a different approach with their gameplay loop in order to maintain the illusion of a full and worthwhile JRPG experience.
Persona 3 is a game born from limitations, and with compromises comes creativity. When you don't have the biggest budget in the world, you need to get smart with how you allocate your resources. This is why the calendar system and Tartarus were such an effective idea from a development standpoint. It allowed for a smart reuse of environments, so that time could be spent on other aspects of the game.
Instead of an A to B traditional JRPG experience, Persona 3 featured a procedurally generated dungeon that would periodically open more of itself up as the story progressed throughout a 1-year time period, where the player would experience the life of a high school boy in moments of downtime. In reality, this was all done to give Persona 3 the illusion of a lengthy and fulfilling experience, but it was so unique and so well executed that the level of Persona's success off of the third installment alone now remains to this very day as the framework of all Persona titles, seeing adjustments and improvements in the system with each new game, evolving with the release of Persona 4, and culminating in the legendary experience that was Persona 5. And even seeing further innovations in the formula with the release of Metaphor ReFantasio. Persona's creativity through restraint would even be recognized and utilized by other game franchises. Fire Emblem Three Houses, a turn-based strategy RPG, would practically rip the calendar system and school setting entirely from Persona, and go to create what is the most successful Fire Emblem game to date, with the most beloved cast of characters the franchise has ever seen.
Kill every last one of them!
See guys, this is why the Golden Deers are just better. You don't got some literal psychopath running around and slaughtering people. As for you Black Eagle enjoyers, we all know you just want to be in a lesbian relationship with your 4'2" dictator. You're not kidding anyone here. With all this in mind, I hope you all can understand why I was so willing to give the TV mode in Zenless Zone Zero the time it needed to develop into something worthwhile. As while the ZZZ team had the least budget and staff of the 3 modern Hoyoverse games, there was always a chance for them to rise above through the unique challenges they would be given. Unfortunately, we don't live in that timeline. Here's what actually happened. I'm not oblivious to why the TV mode failed. It wasn't properly advertised before the 1.0 launch of the game, it was too slow paced, too much hand-holding, and people just wanted to play the hack-and-slash combat. However, it was naive of those who played ZZZ during its beta test period to think that Hoyo would just abandon a staple system element like the TVs so close to the full release of the game, and opted to ride out the criticism as they worked to improve upon it. Had they stripped it bare, it would have put them so far back in terms of development costs and release time. Unfortunately, as a gacha game, ZZZ can't afford to just ride out the rough edges of the TV mode in time for refined changes and polish like the Persona franchise could, with new releases improving on the calendar and dungeon systems. Gacha games need enough financial backing to constantly meet a rapid-fire 6-week update cycle, and losing too much revenue too quickly can spiral a game out of control. Because of this, Zenless Zone Zero had drastically cut back on the TV mode content as early as version 1.3, and ultimately stopped developing anything new for it in version 1.4 onward. It just so happens to be a massive coincidence that 1.4 was the height of the game's development, with the HSOS 6 story arc and the conclusion of the primary plot of Season 1 involving the most animated cinematics, comic scenes, and character interactions. And it all went downhill from there. Hey ZZZ team, I know we just took away your only means of an effective resource allocating gameplay system, but now you need to rewrite your whole story to narratively explain why the H.D.D system is no longer the primary method of story delivery. Corporate has also decided you need to make an open world too, and that needs to be done by version 2.0. All the while, your staff is split between working on every game version leading up to 2.0 as well. And with all that in mind, you are hemorrhaging money fast because it turns out the people demanding to have TV mode taken out didn't come back at all, or left shortly afterwards anyway. So you can do all this by that time, right?
I see. Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?
In the absence of a cost-effective means to develop new gameplay content for ZZZ, the cracks would begin to show until we are left with the massive gaping holes we have now. Version 1.5 was mostly fine, and there wasn't any alarm bells to ring just yet. It was version 1.6 and 1.7 where everything went to shit. In the Soldier Zero Ambi story, we had our first taste of an incredibly egregious black screen. In the second level of the story, Ambi needs to infiltrate an experiment laboratory to eavesdrop on a conversation. If the TV mode still existed, the player would have just moved the Ambi sprite across an abstract representation of a ventilation system to get into position to listen in on the antagonist. With the TV mode gone, we can't do that anymore, and we are left with a black screen to explain what happens to the setup for the scene. And following that, we have another black scene to transition you back to the combat outside of the laboratory. Once we get into the 1.6 story content, things get even worse, as Lycon sets up a meeting with new Eridu's mayor to present Bell and Wise with a plot MacGuffin that magically alleviates the twins' weak ether aptitude instantly. And now, the major plot point of the twins being restricted in how they can navigate hollows, and by extension, Eos, has been reduced to nothing. Now go run around in this reused map from version 1.0 while you screw around with trains and play with an M0 pre-buff Ellen Joe. Have fun, buddy. We have some pointless debate minigames a la Honkai Star Rail that cannot be failed, a scene where Hugo beats up Hollow Raiders, but there's a black screen so we can't see what's going on, Envy and Trigger playable sections because Vivian and Hugo's banners aren't ready for this game version. And how many times are we going to have major story plots take place in this damn ballot Twins Hollow? 1.7 is just as bad, but for different reasons. In the version 2.0 dev talk, the ZZZ team decided the best direction for the story to go is to integrate agent story content into the main story to prevent disjointed narrative experiences to players. What this results in is that Hugo's story is just randomly and abruptly dropped onto players at a major point in the 1.7 story that has, for the most part, been focusing on building up Vivian the entire time. And now we have finally caught up. Version 2.0. It's poor story pacing, lacking in focus, and 45 black screens. I hope at this point in the video, I have made it clear enough that this is not a situation born out of laziness or giving up. The ZZZ team of Hoyoverse have not been adequately equipped to handle a complete rework of their game at this scale, and the evidence is everywhere. Yet despite this, a staggering number of people can't seem to see the writing on the walls and continue to dogpile on this struggling development team and kneecapped game. There may come a time eventually where Zenless Zone Zero comes out ahead of the nightmare that is their complete reworking of the gameplay loop and rewrite of crucial story elements, but right now, it looks like we are nowhere near close. And everyone not willing to sit back and wait are calling for the end times of the game already following a lackluster 2.0 launch. All I can really say is that it is a rough time to be a ZZZ fan, and it's all because no one was willing to understand and have perspective for the TV mode, all the while wondering where the gameplay depth went when all that's left of the game is Honkai Impact 3rd with less content and none of the beloved characters that made Honkai Impact 3rd an iconic Hoyoverse game for so long. And with that, I have said all I really wanted to about the ripple effect of the TV mode's removal in Zenless Zone Zero, and the effects of it we are still feeling to this very day. It frustrates me to no end that no one is willing to consider for a second how we got here in the first place, and the only conclusion anyone ever wants to draw is some accusation of laziness born from players' constant need to judge ZZ for being a Hoyoverse game, and by extension, its association with Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. Despite Zenless Zone Zero objectively being the Hoyoverse game that has changed the most based on player feedback, it still remains the punching bag of the wider gacha industry for the sins of its older siblings and for the sin of releasing a month after Wuthering Waves. At this point, it wouldn't surprise me if despite 1.4 and 2.0 both acting as soft relaunches of this game, we're gonna have to go through another soft relaunch until we can finally turn this ship around. But until then, this was a video about TVs, and I'm clocking out.